Welcome to the Invested Teacher Podcast with Kyle Pierce, Matt Bigley, and John Orr.
Get ready to be taught as we share our successes and failures encountered during our real-life lessons, learning how to build generational wealth from the ground up.
Welcome, invested students. That's you. To another episode of the Invested Teacher Podcast.
Yes, my friends, and today we're going to be taking a little bit of a break about talking about specific strategies, as we had mentioned, those hurdles that we had in real estate. And now we're going to start thinking a little bit more long-term, almost really getting your head wrapped around, like, why are we even doing any of this work anyway? And I know that we often have these conversations, and I know, Matt, you and I, for many years have, you've defined it, or not defined it, but read a book about our personal beliefs. You constantly brought up this idea. And it's taken us many years to continue to try to get a sense of, like, why are we doing this in the first place? And
what's
it's
it all
like
for?
Visualizing. Yeah, like why do we want to have some sort of wealth building strategy going on? What is the goal? Like, what do we foresee for ourselves? And I'm going to be honest and say, guys, I don't know about you, but I don't know exactly. But I do know that I want to feel that I'm not, like, restrained or constrained, because I don't know exactly what my future is going to look like or what I'd like it to look like. But what I know I don't want it to look like is a scenario where I feel like I don't have enough funds to, allow me to just do the things I'd like to do in life. And again, I'm struggling still to define what those things are. I want to flip it right to Matt right now, because you're the one who brought me to this idea of a personal beliefs. What book was it? And sorry to put you on the spot here, but that is where my head has gone when we were chatting about hopping on and talking about retirement and planning and what that might look like.
This idea of a personal beliefs is really the kind of same concept as honing in on your why. Start with why. What's your purpose here? And it's something this guy, Don Campbell, who's one of the OGs of real estate investing in Canada, started this organization called RAIN, the Real Estate Investing Network, and bought a number of his books. And he likens it to this idea of your personal Belize. So for him, Belize was this magical place where he would retire to, and all of the work that he was doing was to help him achieve his own personal Belize. And so got into sharing this idea when we first started investing, because listen, what is the point of doing all this extra work, of going above and beyond? Now, listen, I think all three of us are people who really enjoy the work and really enjoy the learning. So that's part of it. But there's a definite financial aspect to this as well. And we've all been fortunate in having these defined benefit pension plans and having a lot of certainty around retirement. And let's be honest, not a lot of people have that. So that's been a huge plus of teaching. But I think both of you have always kind of wanted to push that as part of our financial journey in life, and to really understand what we can achieve, how we can maximize, or not necessarily maximize, but enhance our life's financial trajectory. So that's really of interest to me. And I've spent a lot of time meditating and thinking about, why am I doing this? Who am I doing it for? What's the purpose behind any of this to begin with?
Right. And I think that's so important to think about when we're starting to our retirement plan or thinking about retirement. I know that many people, maybe I shouldn't say many people, but maybe myself, like when I get into thinking about retirement, you don't think about it right away. I remember actually having a conversation with my dad, who was close to retirement. He's a retired teacher. And I remember when I first started teaching, he's already started to try to talk to me about retirement planning and like am I buying into my pension, because I taught my first 2 years out of country, and then it was like, well, what are you going to do to get back your pension out of those 2 years?
Teaching on Monday,
and I was like, Dad, that's far down the road, and he's like, well, you're eventually going to want to know, and I remember not really thinking about that when we first started, and I don't know about you guys if that was the case, but I thought, I'm going to be fine because I know that seeing from my dad that he always just focused on the pension being the be all end all, that we would be fine. And I think I thought that out as well too. But I think that can be, that can be fine for folks. And I think knowing your why, Matt, is so important because if I'm viewing that like my dad by saying like, hey, I'm just going to keep living the way I'm living. I'm going to keep doing the things I'm doing here, and I want that to continue. This is supposed to continue that, that's supposed to continue that. So it's almost like, but if I don't view that lifestyle after I retire as anything different than what my day-to-day looks like now, then maybe I have to think about my why, because I'm putting all this work in, in my day job to build that pension up. In that kind of retirement planning up. But then it's like, if I'm going to be doing anything extra, if I'm going to be, taking the steps that we've been talking about on this podcast by, getting into real estate, getting into investing, you're right. Like, why do that if I don't need to? Like, why would I want to take all this work in if I didn't necessarily enjoy it? If I just thought, hey, I'm going to be fine in the future with this plan. So I think, thinking about what we want our lifestyle to look like, in the future, and why am I putting all this work in to build this wealth is so important. Because we could just sit back, right? We could just sit back and watch Netflix if that's what I really want to do, or if I'm going to head to my basketball game later and do a little bit of coaching on the side. If that's all I want to do, then you're right. Why would I want to put myself through all this rigor of learning something new if I didn't really need to? But if I do want to start changing my trajectory because I want my retirement to look different, or if I want my life to look different, then I definitely need to start thinking about what that looks like.
I love it. And, again, I feel like if you're listening to this podcast right now, you're probably either you have a clear vision of exactly why you want to, impact or influence your trajectory, your financial trajectory. Maybe you have a why and and you're super clear on it. And that's amazing if that's you and you're listening. If not, if you're not clear, and again, I don't feel that I'm 100% clear, but what I will say is that you're listening because you probably know that what you don't want to do is become that person that is just watching Netflix or is just, so if you think about it, and we're not knocking it. If maybe you're that evening after work, after the kids go to bed, you want to watch that show, and maybe that's, you and your partner maybe are watching TV, and that's a way to spend time together, and that's great. But I'm guessing that you're listening because your vision of retirement isn't to do that 12 more times, or a multiple of 12 times more than you're doing it now. You're probably I'm going to want to do other things. And, I know one thing for certain is that we love traveling. My wife and I love traveling, and we want to be able to do more of that. We want to experience the world. I picture, my retirement as being the opportunity to be a part of our family. So just like my parents are with our children, just like Chantal's parents are with our children, I want to be able to do that with my children. And if they have kids and choose to have kids, that would be fantastic. But you only get one of these things, right? So it's I don't want to just know that I watched every episode of some series, right? I want to say that I was able to go see the world. I was able to experience the world. And I also think too, that when you put yourself in a better financial position, I think about the work we do as educators, and maybe some of you listening are educators, maybe some of you are doing other sorts of work. But I picture, we enjoy helping, and, we coach, we do things to help students. And I picture, if you have yourself set up in a position where, let's say you don't have to have a formal day-to-day because you've retired, quote unquote, and you also then free up some time so that you can do other things whether it's clubs or community activities, things that will give back. Like I truly think that once money is out of the way and you don't have to concern yourself with it, I feel like it opens your mind to just be able to get up and do good things because it makes you feel good at the end of the day. So, those are my sort of whys. Bigly, where's your heads at when it comes to your personal beliefs? Like, is it just to make sure you're good, or do you have like a vision in your mind of, you and Leslie, what that might look like? Like maybe she could, design any house she wants, without any budgets. I don't know. Where's your heads at?
One of the funny things about having a set retirement date, like something in teaching, I talked about this on previous episodes. Mine was November 2035. Like I knew when I was going to retire. How much you're going to get in retirement. That's both, I think, enthralling and also really scary, because it also means, like, for some people, that's the end of their working life or their productive days. And I'm someone who really enjoys learning and working. And it's not that I'm so much a slave to my job. I think is just someone who is just so passionate about the process and always learning and always just seeking. And so I actually picture in retirement continuing to work and find some worth and value. And I think there'd almost be something really neat in your mindset, knowing that you're doing this because you want to, not because you have to. And this idea of continuing to earn some income, continuing to learn is really attractive to me. One of my big whys is leaving some generational wealth to my kids. I think we all go back to how we were raised, and I've talked about that in previous episodes, having some, financial challenges as a kid, and that stuff really kind of resonates with you as an adult. And I think one of the attractive parts about getting into teaching was this idea that you have this certainty from which to operate from. And that certainty has now allowed me to have a lot more freedom, because in that hierarchy of needs, I haven't been worried, not to say I haven't been concerned at moments or times about finances, but you're not worried because you have that predictability. So it almost becomes, kind of gamify it. So if we've got this base, what can we do over and above that base? So for me, it's about curiosity. It's about sort of enhancing Kyle, you're a pretty frugal guy. John, you're a pretty frugal guy. I am maybe not so frugal. Like, I like nice things. I'm not a big traveler, but I like to have a really nice home. I like to have a nice ride. I like to be able to, do some things that maybe a more frugal lifestyle wouldn't fit into the budget. So I think that it's an interesting comparison and contrast here. And John, what do you sort of see, and what are you picturing when it comes to both your why and what retirement's going to look like for you?
Yeah, you know what? And I was just thinking about this as you said that you saw or see, maybe it's now, see yourself, working past retirement, and almost like probably I would have guessed to say, like, Matt, you don't see like retirement probably as a definition has changed for you, if you're going to say, like, because maybe you always saw retirement like that for you, whereas my retirement picture plan always was, I'm going to work till, mine was 2036, Matt. That year, that's the year I'm just going to, like, I'm out, guys. There's no more supply teaching for me. We're going to travel. And I think that was like what Kyle said. I wanted to be able to travel. I wanted to be able to experience the world. And we used to always put off plans like that. It would be like, when we retire, we will do this. When we will retire, we're going to do that. And I think that's the way I always envision it. But I think now I've changed that definition, and I think it's more along the lines of what you're saying, Matt, about saying, like, retirement is like you're not gonna. I viewed it as like I was gonna go and sit and read for all day, but it's like, really, when I think about it, I was like, I would just have time to just do what I want. But then I'm like, well, what do I want to do? Like, I think what we really want is just the freedom, right? Like, what's the freedom to do what we want? And I think I've come to learn that I really like to work on projects, or I like to work on, we've been building a business. That's really got me going for the last couple of years on the excitement of, like, trying these different approaches, learning new strategies. I can see that my retirement now is going to be kind of continuing that. We talked about, we're talking here all about investment and how sometimes that we talk about it being passive, but it is a lot of active reflective pieces, and I see that as like filling a lot of my days on that kind of thing. So I'm kind of thinking along the lines of that as kind of our kind of plan. But I think going back to the other piece to say like Matt, if I continued my pension and thinking about having that pension, I often ask myself, when it comes to that time, since I want to explore, I want to do these things, will that be enough to go and have a particular, a vacation every year or multiple vacations every year? I continually ask myself that question. Like, I know that there are going to be some things that I keep saying to myself, like my house is going to be paid for. I won't have my mortgage anymore. Will, if I took that mortgage payment, will that be enough to fuel my trips that I want to go on? I'm not sure. I bet I actually should, we should be planning these things. We should be thinking about how we want that retirement to look, and will we have enough money based off our current situation to fuel that look. So we've been talking, gentlemen, all three of us, about what we want it to look like. Now let's talk about, do we have enough to kind of help that along, and what can we do if it's not enough, so that we can pad it to make it enough?
I love it. Kind of what I'm hearing from both of you, and I'm hearing it in my own thinking as well. Specifically, Matt, like you're talking about this idea, like what I'm hearing now that you're out of education, like formally out of education, you're in the real estate space. It's actually a really interesting profession to be in, because it's very, I don't want to say easy, because I think it's going to be hard for you to say no when you're at that time, but it's like you can never have a retirement date in that industry. And you could essentially, like even today, like you can decide that I am going to say no to this listing or that, client or whoever, or maybe pass them on. And like, there's so many, the flexibility is endless there. I think the hard part that you have in that industry is actually finding a way to say no. Whereas on the other hand, when you think in the education space, it's sort of like there was this like cutoff date that you decide, either am I going to go and am I going to work into retirement? Like it's almost like you decided, because when you say yes, you went past, and now it's like you have to make a decision if you are going to add flexibility to your life. And you're in a profession where you actually have that there, but I know you, and I worry for you, because I know that you are like me and you're like a yes person, right? So you're like, you love doing the work, and as long as you love it, that's amazing. I think what I'm hearing from all three of us, and maybe those people at home listening, maybe you're feeling this way too. It'd be amazing. In my mind, I picture, whether it's with a defined pension or whether it's with your own investments or a combination of the two, that there is enough money coming in each week, month, year, whatever, however you want to look at it, so that, Matt, that financially speaking, that your lifestyle monetarily won't be influenced or impacted negatively. I mean, positively, of course, more money impacts it positively. But when you say no to something, that it's not actually going to affect your life, your happiness, your routines. And I think that's exactly what we want to dig into here today, is sort of looking at that and trying to get a handle on what that looks like and sounds like. And I think for, both John and I, who we love doing our Make Math Moments business, we love doing it. We were just in Arizona. We did a keynote speech. We love that work, and we're so passionate about it. When we can get to a point in our lives where we can say yes to a keynote because we want to go say the speech, which we always do, but we also are like, we just want to go do it. And actually it, like, the whole money part doesn't even matter at all. Like right now, everything we do, that always comes into the conversation, right? Like we have to look at it and go, okay, like if we say yes to that, we're saying no to something else. Should we go for this many days? Should we go for 1 day? Should we go and actually engage in that particular speaking engagement? So it'd be great if we were just like, you know what? that seems like an amazing event to go speak at. Let's go do it. We want to go do it. And that's it. And that's all there is to it. And any monetary aspect of it is just a bonus. It's just sort of like a nice little way to, to add to your monthly budget. But that's what we want to dig into here. And I'm wondering, fellas, let's speak to some of our people who have a defined pension plan first. I know that's not as many people anymore. Here in Ontario, educators in particular are actually very blessed to have a defined pension plan, and one that's actually, I think, one of the best in the world. A lot of people would classify it as. John, tell us a little more about that pension plan, and then maybe we can use that as like a starting or a leap point for some people who are like, hey, I've got a defined pension plan, and then we can kind of maybe shift our thinking a little bit to some of those pension plans that maybe aren't defined, or where you're like on your own. There's a lot of people in industry that are on their own to take care of themselves, and that's obviously a much bigger burden.
Yeah, that's true. And like you said, we're blessed as educators to, when you sign up as a educator here in a especially a publicly funded school system, you're going to have automatically signed up to the pension plan where you make contributions right off your paycheck, right? Like, so you're not even building that into your pension, like your budgeting. Like we talked about budgeting way back in one of the first couple episodes of like how to set up and budget for your wealth building. The beautiful part about a pension plan is it comes right off the top. This is also true in a lot of maybe private companies and say their matching systems. In the States you have 401ks, or you have our retirement plans with, say, a private company here in Canada. Comes off the top, which is nice. You're making probably, if you're making $100,000, you're probably making about $12,000 contribution to your pension plan every year that you don't even see. Which builds over time. And so when you retire, you hit your 85 factor. You've got your years of experience plus your age hitting 85. This is the time that you get to walk away, and you automatically start collecting, about, what is it, guys? 60-ish% of 62% of your.
I think it's 60% if you do that full. You
get to the end. Now it adds
all the check boxes,
right,
for that particular pension.
And every year,
is fantastic, right?
Right, and every year I think you work after that. I think you gain 2% on top of that. So it's nice to say by the time I retire. So if I retire at 2036, which was my date of retirement, and that's because I lost a year or something because I didn't buy into it right away when I taught out of country. But in 2036, I can walk away with getting my 60% of my salary, and then that's for life, right? I'm going to have that forever. And then that's what I was saying. I can plan to have that and not do anything after that. But let's think about how can we pad that, and I think that's an important part of what we're talking about here, because I know that for me, moving past that is I don't want my lifestyle to be what I'm doing now. Then if I want to travel, right? Because if you're going to travel and do all these other things, guys, think about your summers. As teachers, as educators, we are also blessed with summer vacation, right? How much money
you're making this job sound pretty good here, John.
I know. It is. Well, hey, this is why we call it the golden handcuffs, right? Because it is it is a great job to have. You have that security, you have all these defined benefits. Summer vacation, I don't know if you're not an educator, us educators probably spend the most money in the summer, because we have you have your 9 weeks off, your 2 months off. And if you have young families, or even if you don't have young families, you're usually going to do something. That's your vacation. And so you have all this time, and you don't usually want to sit around and waste it, because you're like, I got to maximize my summer. This is my vacation time. And we spend so much money in the summer, at least I do as in my family, by doing what we want to do, vacation, by traveling. But then it's when you go to retire, I want that to that's what I want to do. I want to do my summers all year, right? So it's okay, will I have enough from this pension And I think in the work that, the calculations I'm doing is not enough.
Right.
And I think anecdotally, when I think about, so if we take that 60 odd $1,000 that a typical teacher will get, I feel like the teachers that I know who are retired, be it neighbors or friends in the community, like they live what appears to be from the outside a fairly frugal existence, and there's not lavish trips and lots of splashing out. So I guess if we kind of know what to expect in retirement, 60 odd thousand, the wonder is like, will it be enough? And Kyle, you're such a great numbers cruncher. So how do we either make it enough, or how do we figure out if it is enough?
Yeah. And, there's some simple things you can do without, I guess, doing a ton of work. And like some of the things that we, wrote down here, and we'll include them in the show notes for you to consider, is, making a list of the things that you're not going to have to do anymore, right? I think that's a really important thing to be made aware of. John, you mentioned the mortgage. So right now, are you in a position, and I'm asking the audience, not you specifically, John, are you in a position where the house you're living in, if you rent it, and if you don't plan to purchase, like if you're renting, then you're going to always have that rent.
Right.
And unfortunately, the reality is that rent's going to continue to increase, likely, unless you never leave and you're living in a place like Ontario where, they can only bump the rent by a very, very low amount. But if you're in the US and you're in a state that is very landlord friendly, then that rent could be, increased on you at any point. Certain states have those rules. If you're in a house and you own the house, how much time is left on that mortgage? Like, is it, have you been paying it off for 10 years and now maybe you have 15 years left on that house and you're retiring in 15 years? Hey, perfect timing, right? No more mortgage. Or have you done some refinancing in order to fund, post-secondary for kids or renovations or whatever it might be? So you've got to kind of factor those things in. But there are some things that you're not going to have to pay anymore. And, here in Canada, we have certain, deductions that come off. So Canada pension plan, so just like Social Security in the U.S. That's, I think the maximum you can be charged for CPP is something like $3,800 or something a year. So, that is something that you'll no longer be paying once you actually retire. No more retirement fund contributions, right? So, that I think it was 12,000 or so that teachers here in Ontario pay into that plan. So looking and seeing like what is being deducted from my current paycheck in order to go into that fund. Something to note is that the employer, the school board that you work for here in Ontario, is also contributing on your behalf, which again is why the pension is so robust and great. But off your salary, that like $12,500 is no longer coming off. You're not going to have as much of an income or as high of an income. So therefore, your income taxes will not be as high if the government doesn't raise income taxes, which I feel like arrows are pointing towards. How are we going to get out of this mess without raising income taxes? So that's a discussion for another day. So, keep that in mind. Unemployment insurance, maybe union dues, like really going through and figuring out like what will I no longer be paying is something that I think is really important. And then you can start thinking about what does that look like and sound like. My parents, for example, when they retired, they decided that they only needed one car. So, and they didn't find it to be a restriction. Like they didn't mind it. Now, for some people, you're like, I couldn't imagine not living, without my own car so I could, get up and go at any time. They had no problem cutting that out. So that's insurance that they're saving. That's the car payment maybe. Do I have car payments? Am I leasing or have I purchased a car and am I willing to hang on to that car for the longer term? So these are all things that are definitely worth thinking about just to get a sense of like, okay, so what would my if I know that defined pension amount every month, is that going to be enough based on the life I'm living now? And then am I going to be like John, where John in the summertime wants to like go on the, many trips and all of these things, which cost more money? Is that going to be enough buffer for me to be able to continue doing those things? Or am I going to feel like I'm, sort of stuck in my home for 10 months of the year until I want to go on my summer vacations?
And that just, brought up something very interesting that we should probably chat about too, Kyle. And we chatted about this a while ago. Matt, you brought up the Die with Zero book, which when we talked about that, I went out and read that over one day, and the interesting thing I remember thinking about that book is that it brings up this interesting idea that you think that I need this much money to spend per year. And I was thinking specifically about retirement when I was thinking about this book, but he says that there's like certain lifetime ranges that make sense for certain periods of your life. So for example, in retirement, you think you need to have blank amount of money to spend for the rest of your life. So like if you're going to get your $60,000 for the rest of your life, that's per year for the rest of your life. Now, the Die with Zero book talks about, trying to organize your life now so that you leave, nothing at the end. And that doesn't mean don't leave stuff for your family. That means just setting it up now for your family and making sure that, it's taken care of. It's just about organizing it so that it's all kind of budgeted or taken care of. And what I remember thinking was the most interesting that triggered when Kyle was talking was that when let's say you retire at 55, there's going to be a set time where you have the ability and the money to go, which is I have the ability of I feel good. I have a lot of mobility. I can walk around and do tours. I can travel. I don't have problems traveling. There's a set time where that makes sense for us. But then when we get older into our retirement, we're still pulling that same money every year from my pension. But there's going to be a time where it's it doesn't make sense to do this. I might say in my first years of retirement, I'm going to want to travel to China. I'm going to want to travel to Taiwan, and I'm going to want to travel to these. But maybe in the latter half of my retirement, it's I won't want to do that. I don't have the energy. Right? I don't have the energy to do that. Maybe there's a part, the period of your life where all of a sudden there's grandkids and you're choosing to be around them as much as possible. Or what Kyle, you're saying, you physically can't anymore because of say the limitations that all of a sudden, your age has brought upon you. And there's things that we kind of always assume that we're going to be, will I run out of money because of the way I want to live my money, live my life, but there's a set time here where this money makes sense to spend now. And then this money over here that, hey, I might not need as much as I think I need down there.
Yeah, that book was such a seminal read for me, such a game-changing read. I love when you encounter some ideas that just you hadn't even considered before, and they're fresh because there's so few fresh ideas in the world. So to me, a couple of things came away from that book is really think, and I'm obsessed with thinking about retirement. It's almost become a preoccupation of mine. There's a great series in the Globe and Mail that I read daily about, retirement projections. They take scenarios and try to help you. And in the next episode, I think we're going to do that and look at some retirement scenarios. And I'm just, for some reason, it is an obsession of mine. So this Die with Zero helped me think about, it's not just your financial health, but it's actually your physical health and how that's going to maybe change and evolve over time. And this idea of let's plan it now, but let's actually not wait until we retire to do some of these things. And then secondarily, one of my big whys is leaving my kids with a head start, with some generational wealth to pass on to them that should help propel their financial futures forward and give them some financial security. Well, the Die with Zero really talks about how you pass that along when your kids actually need it, as opposed to waiting until you're, old and maybe in ill health, and they've already gone through those life stages where your money, passing that down to them, could have been of most benefit to them. So those are some really cool takeaways, for me from that book. And it just really got me thinking about, I think as teachers and other similar professions, we can log on and see our exact retirement date, but have we really, really pictured what it looks like? Now, in my shift from teaching to real estate, I have got, John, what you talked about earlier, I have got complete freedom. I joked with Kyle last week that I am a much harder boss to myself than any boss
Mm-hmm.
I've ever encountered. Like to me, freedom went, when you're teaching, you're at school from a minimum of sort of 8 till 2:30. Well, my workday now has literally no end. Like I
Right.
am I am easily working 6 and oftentimes 7 days a week for certainly 10, 12, 14 hours a day. Now, within that, I've got the freedom to choose when I work and where I go. And yeah,
Right.
Kyle, I've got to maybe get a little better at deciding what to say no to. But for me, freedom has actually looked like a lot more work than it ever did as a
Mm.
teacher.
Mm.
And I'm harder on myself, jokingly but seriously, as having this freedom of real estate and not being tied to a particular school day. So some interesting takeaways as I picture what that looks like. And I think this topic of like, we now kind of know what we can expect. We've got to figure out, will it be enough to do the things you want to do? And I think from there, we start to think about, well, how can I enhance it? And how can I start now to help ensure that future, whatever it looks like for me,
Mm-hmm.
is going to be enough? What are some of the things that I can start to think about and implement now to be able to pay off not only now, but in that future life as well?
Yeah, you've highlighted something that I think a lot of people, talk about, and there's that saying. It's like, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Which is, I mean, it's true, but it's a lie, because it's like it's still hard work, right? But you enjoy the work, and I think at the end of the day, it's like when you do something that you enjoy, or that something beneficial happened on the other end, right? Whether it's helping someone, whether it's accomplishing something, you've reached a goal, you feel good, right? And I think that's what keeps you going in a profession like yours, Matt, where you're like, I want to serve my clients. I want to make sure that, when they think of me, they, they're talking about you in a positive manner, and, that I can depend on you. These are all characteristics that are really important. And, the interesting part as well is that I think, when it comes to like a defined pension plan, that, a place where you were living in that world and you were trying to supplement at the time, right? You were looking at supplemental income. It's like the defined part is like very clear cut. But then as you go over the other part of the, the spectrum, you get to this place where it's like when it's not defined, it becomes foggier. And something that, we were chatting about just briefly is like, I know, for example, my parents have defined pension plans through their former employers. And then they also have like some additional, like an additional nest egg there. And I think it's interesting because when you know exactly what's coming into your account, it's sort of like you tend to kind of live within and budget within that. But then over here is kind of more of a mystery, right? And I think that's really where we're going to try to head in this next episode, is really like talking about the mysterious portion. So if you are blessed to have a defined pension, great. If you're listening to this podcast, if you're that person, you're probably trying to supplement that. We want to sort of make that less of a mystery, right? And if you have no defined pension, then we want to help you so that you don't just feel like you're like, I'm hoping and praying that everything works out okay. And I think what it means is, and this is going to be my takeaway, and I'll hand it back to you guys to share your reflections from this episode. But I think what I'm realizing through this conversation is that the work that needs to happen now for all of us, including our listeners, is we need to really think about what's like our lives that we're leading now. How, happy are we in the time we spend and how we spend our time and use our time? And then try to extrapolate that to when you are in a position to, the word retirement is maybe not the right word, because I think the three of us are never going to stop doing productive things. We're never going to stop learning and wanting to, do things productively, but we'll just do it on our own time.
Right.
What's that going to look like for you? So for you listeners, before next episode, so you've got 1 week before the next episode drops, I want your big takeaway to be that you want to think about what is it that you want that to look like and sound like, and not just aimless things like I could spend money on anything I want, because that's not realistic, right? Like, I mean, is it a Ferrari, or is it that you want to, go out to dinner 2 times a week? Like, try to define what does that look like? And then, of course, you don't want to have a plan in place that gets you to exactly that point. Because what if you're a little wrong, right? Right? You want to make sure that you pad that a little bit so that, just in case things don't go as planned, we'll share some numbers in a spreadsheet here and give you some ideas of how you might be able to play with those numbers. But again, those numbers mean nothing until you get a better sense of like, what am I hoping to do? Do you want to leave a bit of a legacy behind or some generational wealth behind? Like, how much is that? Like, you can't just say, I'd like to leave, some money. Is it 20,000? Is it 200,000, 2 million? Like, what's that number? And really trying to define. I think the clearer we all get in what this view of the future will look like, the better prepared we can be in order to figure out what do we need to do now in order to at least put ourselves on that trajectory that we were talking about, so that we can actually influence and impact our financial trajectory as we've discussed here today.
Yeah, I think that's the big takeaway for me as well, Kyle, is to define, what you want that to look like. When you have your freedom, when you get that financial freedom, will we have enough? And I think that's the question that most of us are going to be asking, and I'm excited to dive into that next episode to kind of like go through the scenarios, because I like you, I'm a numbers guy. I'd love to see that if I do this, how does that translate into that number that I'm expecting? Like Matt, you brought up that the Globe and Mail in that article that you shared with us this morning about saying, like, if you wanted to retire at 55, you should have, blank amount of money, or if you wanted to retire at 55 and you wanted to pull $75,000 a year, you need to have $1.5 million, at that time. So it's kind of like, what happens if I don't have that money? And how, if I want to do all these other things, how can I shift that? And what happens if I buy a property, or what happens if I have these other investments that we've been talking about here on the podcast? How does that change those numbers? And what does that mean about my lifestyle and how I can say, take my trips and do these other things that I want to do and make sure that I want to live the lifestyle that I want? So excited to dive into those numbers on the next episode.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for sharing both of your big takeaways here. I think for me, the big takeaway is around this idea of your own personal beliefs, like really thinking about, and then even documenting, like put this in a Google Doc, write it down for yourself. What does it look like? And know that this is going to evolve and change over time. But I think having a starting place, something that you can reflect on, is incredibly powerful. It removes some of the fear. It also gives you some hope and some motivation. And when you perhaps realize that you're either on track or not on track to achieve your personal beliefs, this might spur you to action, because all investing, and real estate investing is the same way, it is time in the market. So there's steps that you take now so that you can enjoy that appreciation, that compounding effect on your investments. So I think it's really about documenting it, articulating it, having some conversations with your spouse or your partner about it. And this is something that is, I think, a beautiful unwrapping of what you're picturing, because so many of us as teachers know when we're going to retire, but maybe haven't thought about what that retirement's going to look like.
I love it. That's a great way to frame this entire episode. And, I'm wondering, you're listening right now, how are you going to reflect on this episode? How are you going to put yourself in a position where you're going to be ready for that next episode where we're going to dig into some scenarios? So do some thinking. And one great way that you can reflect is by writing it down. And what better place to write it down than in the review section on Apple Podcasts, or in a comment on one of the social media posts from @InvestedTeacher. So head on over, leave us that 5-star rating and review, only if you think we deserve it. If you think we deserve 1 star, those are fine too. But make sure that you do take that time. It means the world to us as we try to help more of you out there so that you can change your financial futures.
Awesome there, Kyle. Also, all links and resources, including transcripts from this episode, are found over at investedteacher.com/episode 13. Again, that is investedteacher.com/episode 13.
Fantastic. We've got all kinds of great resources for you at investedteacher.com. We want you to check out our investing blueprint. That's investedteacher.com/blueprint. And if you're interested in delving deeper into what a partnership, or in real estate terms, a joint venture partnership looks like, reach out to us at investedteacher.com/JV.
Well, my friends, class dismissed.
Just as a heads up, the content you heard here today is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice.